Give me 1 second to paste it into community.
Take your time. And thank you, Christina, for all of the many hats that you wear, from technology to note taking to sending the calendar invites.
1 second to
No
paste it
problem.
into this. And good to go. Good to go.
Good to go?
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you everyone for being here today. We started a little bit behind so that we can give folks time to trickle in. There might be some folks that are still trickling in, but we wanted to make sure we gave them enough time, but still started promptly so that we can honor your time. We have a pretty robust agenda, seeing as legislative session is coming up. But really, this is a continuation of last week's conversation. As you all may remember, our CFO was not here because she was away on some work commitments. So there were some questions that came up that we wanted to make sure we address, and some next steps that I think we want to go over today. So I kind of want. Oh, can
Oh, it's
you?
probably the YouTube.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. Are you going? Okay. So we wanted to create space to address those questions at the beginning of this call, just to make sure we are all on the same page. And then we'll go into some other parts of like what's next and what needs to happen. And I had a chance to talk to Caitlin this morning, and she's going to walk us through a little bit. I don't know if y'all remember last time there was a question about being held harmless and what that meant, and how that is our understanding of that, both in this body but also the public, being instrumental, because we need to understand that in order to be efficient in what we are going to be advocating, and to know that we are approaching the right strategies and levers when we are moving into legislative advocacy work. And so I wanted to first start there, and we promised we will go back to it. So I want to start there, and wanted to give the floor over to CFO Richard to see if she can go walk us through what we need to know in order to have a better understanding and be more efficient, and to be correct about what it is that we want to advocate for. So take it away, CFO Richard.
Yes. Good afternoon, everyone. So I can share a bit about how the education cost sharing formula works, specifically this question on hold harmless, because I think that there's a couple misconceptions related to it, that I can hopefully try to clear up. So when it comes to education cost sharing, that is the funding that we get from the state per pupil. It works based on giving us dollars per pupil for resident students, so the resident students in Hartford. And an important part of that is that it is based on an enrollment count of resident students from the year prior. So, for example, this year is fiscal year 26. And so our ECS count for this year is based on October 1st of last year. So October 1st, 2024 is the date that they take, and they say, let's count the number of resident students in Hartford. Let's look at the needs of those students, and we're going to use that to run some formulas and calculate your total amount and allocation from the state. So it is based on 1 year prior. And that's true for every district. So that's how it works in Connecticut. They're looking at that October 1st from the year before and using that to run the formulas to determine the amount of state funding that you get. Now, hold harmless is something that applies science districts. It's about 30 or so districts that are the highest need districts across the state. And what hold harmless says is that they're going to take that calculation and say, what is that total amount of state funding you would get using your enrollment from last year? But we're also going to look at your total state funding from the year prior. So in this case, it's fiscal year 26. They would also look at fiscal year 25. And they would also look at fiscal year 17. That's the year when all of this started. And what they do is they say, so across that fiscal year 17, which is kind of the baseline year, from the last fiscal year, so in our case, FY25, and the current fiscal year, FY26, what is the highest amount of, so just the total amount we would get, and we receive whatever is the highest number. And the reason for this, it means that we will never decrease the total amount of ECS funding that we get. And what's really important, though, this has been used to say, oh, well, Hartford is getting an ECS amount based on an enrollment count from long ago. And what's actually true at this point is the highest amount of all those amounts for us is our current year ECS. So the calculation based on October 1st, 2024 for our current year ECS funding is the highest of all of those amounts. So we actually got an increase to our ECS funding for this year, and that is the highest amount that we have ever had in the ECS formula. The reason for that is because the state has actually never fully funded the ECS formula until the current year. So this year, fiscal year 26, is the first year the state has actually given a full amount of funding to that formula, which means we've actually been seeing increases over the past several years. And it's true that our current funding that we get from the state is based on our latest possible enrollment data. So it is true that if our fiscal year 17 data or our data from last year had been higher, we would have gotten that number. This number that we have for this year, based on October 1st, 2024, is the highest number. So I think if there is a discussion around, well, you're getting funding that's based on prior data, actually, no, not true. We are getting funding based on the latest possible data from last year. And like I mentioned, that's partly because the state has not fully funded the formula until the current year. So I think that that is one thing that may come up if there's an argument around, your ECS formula is based on a date from prior years. It really isn't. We're getting the current ECS funding. And I think another piece just to clear up as well that I've heard is, well, you're getting funding for more students than actually attend Hartford Public Schools. And so just to explain that piece a bit, that's actually true. So for all districts, you get funding based on resident students. So the residents of Hartford, school-aged children, and then there are some things that go into that. So if a student goes to a charter school, they're taken out of the formula. If they're open choice, we only get half of that student. But essentially what it's saying is you district are responsible for financially the students who attend your schools, so who attend Hartford Public Schools, but also the students who live in Hartford and choose to attend other schools. So that's where we are paying for tuition for students who choose to go to non-Hartford public schools, such as magnet schools, such as open choice schools. And so we are getting funded for more students than attend Hartford public schools, but we are still financially responsible for the education of those other students. And so wanted to clear up those two pieces is the hold harmless. It is a thing that exists, but we are is based on our most current enrollment data based on 2024. And yes, we are funded for more students that are educated within Hartford Public Schools, but that is because we pay for the tuition for those students who attend other schools. And that's actually been the single biggest increase in our budget over time is that tuition piece. So those are two points I just wanted to clarify on how the state funding works. And so what is true is that we will never decrease in the amount of ECS funding that. So whatever we have this year, we're not going to go down from that. Some of the things that we're advocating for are actually to increase the amount of ECS that we get. And one caveat I will give is it is hard to know the exact number by which we could increase our ECS because it is dependent on things like number of resident students and some of the choices that students are making relative to charter schools, open choice. So it is tough to predict, here's the exact amount that we could increase the ECS, but we know for a fact the amount that we have right now. So I will pause there.
Thank you. And one of the things we talked about is that regardless of what the conversation is, part of what we have to keep centered is the fact that Hartford Public Schools has to be able to sustain itself, because regardless of the choices that are being made by our students, and we support the choices that they want to make, that if something were to go wrong and those students have to come back to our district, we are responsible to provide that education to that student. So if something were to go wrong or the shifts in what they want to do, let's say as a suburban district wants to go back to their district, they could do that. That home district is responsible for providing that public education. Same thing in Hartford. If something were to happen or students wanted to return to our home district, or we've seen it has happened and it does happen, we have to be financially we have to be able to have the finances necessary to run the school in a way that provides the resources necessary for those students as well, because regardless of the choice, if they decide to come back to their district, we have to be able to provide those resources for those students, right? And so we wanted to clear that up for folks And I see some hands and some questions. I wanted to double check, CFO Richard, if there's anything else you wanted to add for clarity before we started taking questions for board members and from folks in the committee.
No, I think we can take questions.
Perfect. So one thing I will say is that you might hear part of what we're trying to do, CFO Richard and I, and just the board in general, is add a little bit of the education component. It is complicated, yes, how the funding streams show up for Hartford because of I was sort of explaining to CFO Richard that it's almost like a crack on the wall is the institutional is the institutional barriers and institutional systems of oppression, right, that folks in communities of color and working class communities have to deal with. And a lot of the funding structure, a little bit of the patches along the way to try to fix a little bit of that structure, but the structure underneath is still broken, right? And so because it's a lot more complex, part of what we want to do is to reinforce this education, which means you might hear this a couple of times, and we'll make sure that this video gets sent to the members of the committee who are community partners and parents to make sure that they also have this information, because I know it was a concern of theirs. Now I want to open it up for questions. I see board member Walker, and I don't see anybody else, but if we can start with board member Walker.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Hey, CFO Richard, just want clarification on what you actually said. I got the computation of the ECS funding. And did you mention 3 data points or 2? Because
3 data points for the hold harmless. Is if that's
Right.
what you're asking. There's 3
Yes,
different
'cause
years they look at. Yep.
all right, so I got the 2017. That makes sense. Baseline, and then the funding total at that level. Now, this current year, we based on the ECS formula for this year times the number of students from last year, which would be 2025, correct?
I'm sorry.
Okay, you said the current year.
Mm-hmm.
I think that would be the ECF funding level for this year
Yeah.
times the number of students from last year, because you use last year as last year being 2025 as
Yes. So it'll use for the current year, it is based on, yep, the funding formula for this year, which it is now fully funded, times the enrollment from October 1st, 2024 versus
2024.
Yep, it's October 1st, 2024. So
Okay.
because they're looking at in the fall of this year, they look 1 year prior. And
Oh.
so, for example, 2020 fiscal year
Okay,
2025
that's
was
what was
based on
confusing
October
me.
1st,
Okay, so even though we're sitting in 2026, you're really talking about the 2025 to 2026 school year.
Yes, exactly. The
Okay,
25-26 school year, exactly.
and so even though we're talking in January, all of this, if I had to kind of line in the sand, is based on October 1st.
Yes,
So
of the
okay,
prior school year so yeah.
perfect. So the student total you're talking about would be student total from October 2024. Okay, I'm with you now, because you kept mentioning 2024. My head was kind of like, that's the right year. All right, so what's the third data point then in terms of this whole harmless explanation? What's you mentioned a third data point?
It's the previous year's ECS formula.
Okay, that's the third data point. Okay, gotcha. All right, I'm with you. You can move forward. I just was trying to keep up with that, and maybe putting this in writing for us would be good, because I'm sure I'll refer to it again at some point. Thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Walker. And one of the things that CFO Richard and I talked a little bit about is putting some of these data points on just a document to make sure we all have access to them so that we can answer concretely and efficiently and accurately when questions come up, whether it be in our community or when we're meeting with our legislators and when we're doing that level of work, so that we have a little bit of those economic explanations. Because it's one thing to talk about inequities, it's a whole nother thing to be able to name exactly how they show up and how so we want to make sure that we have that available for all of you all, both as an educational component for us to better understand our funding, but also as an advocacy tool as we move forward.
Chair, if I can just quick feedback, CFO Richard, I am so happy that you mentioned the full formula, because I think in community we've heard the logic that the money follows the child, and so we often think that when a child goes to another district that we have no obligation. So I am really glad you cleared up that we have an obligation for students even when they go to other districts.
Absolutely. I want to pause here to see if we have, and some board members have already heard some of this, so I know there might not be as many questions. And again, we'll repeat it here and we'll repeat it a little bit more because I think repetition helps with making sure we deeply understand where we're at. Any other questions from board members or anyone in the call? Going once, going twice. Okay. All right. So that is a really great framework, and thank you, CFO Richard, for breaking that down for us, because that's going to directly have a conversation about what it is that we're going to do legislatively and why, and really tell the why we are doing. And so one of the things, and CFO Richard, I don't know if you wanted to mention a little bit about one of the things that we want to do is meet with this. With an organization that is looking to do very similar work. And I think Board Member Walker also referenced it last time, but I wanted to give CFO Richard an opportunity to talk about the work that they're doing and how one of the things we're going to do next is meet with those folks to get a better understanding of how we can do some of that cross-pollination work. If I can send it over your way again.
She was having trouble with her internet. I think she's spotty right now. Sorry, I was telling you know how every once in a while she was cutting out, and oh, let me see if she's
Yeah.
back.
Can you?
Yeah, I think so. Caitlin, can you hear us?
Can you?
No. Go back to the other.
Okay. Okay.
Wait. Actually,
Oh,
now
can
I
you
think.
hear me there?
Sorta.
Better-ish.
Okay, I can also just call
Oh, no.
in.
Oh, that's good. You're
Might
good.
be
Yes.
better.
Don't move.
Okay, I tried to switch.
I don't know if you heard of my pass off, but essentially it was like, can you talk
I
a little
did
bit about
school and state finance.
this project? Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. So School and State Finance is an organization that they know all the inner workings of how school and state finance works in Connecticut, and they have been leading some legislative advocacy work across districts to propose a nation adjustment to the ECS amount. So it would basically be saying, hey, the ECS amount that we're getting, it needs to go up every year. Costs are going up every year because districts experience inflation in the way that we all do. And so they have been leading a pretty big effort related to that. Their proposal is that to about next year. So it's sizable what they're working on. Part of what they're working on too is how some of the grants work for magnet schools and open choice schools, and around how we would pay. So a lot of it's beneficial to us and mutually beneficial to other districts because it really is something all districts are facing. So we set up time to speak with them next week to understand more about their proposal, how it can align with what we are proposing, so that we can be collaborative with them as they're thinking about proposing proposed bill during the session. So we will be meeting with them early next week to align some of our efforts because it's a good way to connect with some of what the other districts across Connecticut are advocating for as well.
Go ahead, Board Member Francois.
Thank you so much. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Great. So I just wanted to kind of, give a little plug, if you will, for CABE. CABE is also a resource that we have access to because we are members, and they do a great deal with regards to advocating and talking points and all that as well. So it's a good idea to kind of keep them in the loop as well.
Absolutely. Thank you, Board Member Durster Ledger, for sharing that. I had the opportunity to attend the Advocacy Lobby Day from CABE last year, and it was really great as an exercise to meet other members of the Board of Ed communities throughout Connecticut because they do represent the entire state board members. So it was a really good opportunity to meet, create some relationships, and learn a little bit about each other and learn a little bit about some of the efforts that they are engaging with as well. So we'll definitely keep that as one of those partners that we want to make sure we're always checking in with, especially because they do a lot of like our board trainings and they have a lot of resources and information. So I appreciate you lifting that up. And part of the reason we're doing this in conversations is because multiple people are doing multiple work around the state because we are not the only ones that are experiencing this pressure. One thing that we talked a little bit about, CFO Kaylin, Richard, and I this morning, was about the fact that although we have been getting a little bit more of that of those dollars recently, it really is just because we've been so behind in terms of finances, it's really just plugging some of the needs that, so the money has been used to plug some of the needs, not necessarily to allow us to be a stronger, a more financially stable district, right? And I probably, CFO Richard, you probably say that better than I did, but essentially, because inflation is a real thing, those rising in costs, as we are getting more dollars, even if we didn't have, for example, the same amount of students, the costs have gone up, right, in our ability to run just those structural fixed costs that we have, right, as a district. So I also wanted to name that, and I see you going off mute. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to agree, and I think to tie it all together, it's costs are rising in general because inflation exists, right? And so we need more money just to be able to do it before, because so much of our budget at this point is tuition. It's something we have very little control over, and that's rising at a rate. So that's been raising.
Ooh, we're losing you, Caitlin. Can you try to start over? Sorry.
I just texted her to call in. I think at this point, her voice
Yeah.
is important in this meeting, so we're not.
Yes. So we'll give her a second to call in so she can share some of those thoughts because we want to make sure that you all have that information because it's going to be, some of the things we've pointed, Patrick and Nicole, that we want to go after this directly based on one of the reasons we selected some of those things is based on this financial information that we know and what those best levers we can utilize for. So we'll give her a second to call in. And what we can also do while she calls in and is probably, I don't want to move us, but I can pin what CFO Richard was going to say, and then we can go back to it, just so that so that we can have time to move through some of the other items. So the things that are going to happen next is we're going to have the meeting with the state finance project to see what we're going to do. We have our meeting with our delegation in Hartford on the 29th, which will be attending. And then we have those preparations that we have to do in advance of that. And so we're in really good shape. And one of the things that I mentioned to CFO Richard is to have those financial numbers, data points written out, and to have a conversation with the communications team. I think I'll finish this thought up and then you can go ahead, CFO Richard. And to have a deep conversation with the communications team and the outreach team with Pedro and some of the other folks here to make sure that some of those key talking points and data points are clear and available to you all. Because part of what we want to do is also start shifting the narrative, right? It is not that we're just getting this boundless amounts of money that is, and another thing is we got word from the State Department of Education. We passed the audit. We are in good shape, right, in terms of where the state wanted us to be. We are moving in the right direction. So this is all based on need. And so I want to make sure that we're very clear about that. And CFO Richard, you can go right ahead.
Let's see. Does this work? Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, I'm so sorry. I was just going to add everything you just said. And then just on your point on inflation absolutely is hitting everything, all of our expenses, our cost of living increases for staff. But really importantly too is so much of our budget is tuition to other school districts, about 30% of it. And that's where we have very limited control. And that has actually been increasing at a rate faster than inflation. So that goes up about every year, and that's 30% of our budget. And so it just goes to show that when we have gotten increases over time, it's gone to support some of those just inflationary increases over expenses that we don't have a lot of control over. And so I just wanted to emphasize the point that you made, and also just say it hits everyone, inflation, and it hits us particularly strong because we have such a large percent of our budget that is going as tuition to other districts.
Thank you for that. And I hope that sort of served and as sort of like a good level set on then why we're approaching the legislative efforts that we are approaching this year, and why we're making the connections that we're making with these partner organizations to try to push that advocacy forward. And I just wanted to hear from Nicole and Pat to make sure that this still sounds good and we're still in the right direction in terms of the political desire to do this, and just your own lens through this.
Yeah, sure. Maybe I'll start. So that was, very helpful review from Caitlin, and really getting to the bottom line of what we need to be messaging to legislators, and what we need to be asking for. It's consistent to the goals you've set. I did want to ask Krista, Caitlin, it would be great if we could be included in the meeting with, I'm assuming it's Lisa Hammersley, we have in the past collaborated with School and State Finance. They have a great team. They do really good work. And it would just be good for us to hear the direction they're going in, and we can obviously integrate our efforts with what they're doing as we have in the past. But that would be helpful. So if you would consider that, that would be great. Nicole, any other reaction to what we just heard from Caitlin?
No, I think that's great. And I think we're still, on the same page.
Great.
Awesome. And yes, Patrick, we will add you and Nicole to that meeting. Christina, can you reach out to them and see the scheduling works? Is that possible to add them to the meeting? Want to make sure that we're doing that cross-pollination work well and intentionally. And it's good to know that we've collaborated with them in the past and they're a good partner to continue to partner with.
Very good partner.
Okay, beautiful. Now, in terms of the communications and sort of the outreach aspect of this from the district side, is there any updates from your ends, things that you may need, things that are still pending? Some of the, we talked a little bit last time about some of the initiatives you all might take. And you don't have to have everything sort of fleshed out, but if you do have any updates to report, how we want to approach a little bit of that, of the community outreach part of it. I know we talked a little bit about it last time, but if we wanted to rehash it so that we can have next steps ahead of the next legislative session. And I didn't ask, in full transparency, I didn't ask anybody to prepare anything, so it's okay if you share what you have, right? Like this is it's not a gotcha. Just if you have something, feel free to share it.
Is that question for us, Krista? I'm sorry.
No, I'm sorry. That was for the district, the district staff. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Because we talked a little bit about the communications and outreach and what the district might be doing. And I know last time we talked a little bit about what those might be. Do we have any more concrete updates, things that are definitely happening, things that you might need extra support in? Or do you need more time to put those together and maybe send it via email so that we all have access to them and we can touch base on it during the next meeting?
I don't know if Deb can come off, but I think they need more time and also more direction from us. This team.
That's perfect. If we could get a list of ways that we can provide more direction and support, that'll be really helpful.
Okay.
I'm happy to meet with you all too, to make sure that we are, because I know we had a lot of different ideas that we wanted to approach. We also know it's a shorter session. We want to be intentional about what that looks like. So if we want to set up a time to just talk through that, I'm happy to have that conversation. Or if we want to do it via email, whatever is easiest for the district, but I want to make sure you all have what you need. And I know we've had very much competing pieces, both with the legislative task force and all the other committee meetings we're all very much a part of.
Christopher, if I could just comment on that.
Yes, of course.
Every session is a different session, right? And so I think our meeting with the delegation, with the speaker, may inform somewhat about what they might believe this year. Again, the board makes its own decisions, how folks can make, but sometimes that meeting that we generally have every session helps us. They may have some requests and where they may want some community input on stuff. So I think we'll get some more information out of that.
Beautiful. So what I hear for our next step is we'll have the meeting, we'll prep for that meeting, we'll have the meeting with the legislative with our legislative team, and then we'll have we'll have our own, but we'll also have some of their requests and what they might need for the moment. Perfect. And Chairwoman Brody?
Who is diligently watching the stuff that the State Department puts out? In the sense of, if we're strategizing and they've already released some things, like who's monitoring that to make sure, like if they've set priorities and they're moving forward in that?
I
Well,
will
I
say
do.
that, oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go ahead, CFO.
No, I'm curious what you're doing too. Chairwoman, that is something I was looking at because CSDE did put out their legislative priorities last Wednesday at their board meeting. And it is worth us reviewing that and discussing it because they are hitting on some of the areas that we've been discussing in potentially slightly different ways, but also in ways that we could perhaps build on. So I think specifically they put out a legislative priority around open choice special education. That would be around making the sending district responsible for IEPs. So we are already responsible for the financials, and this would also make us responsible for the IEPs. We had discussed various things such as increasing our funding for the students that we're financially responsible for and actually making the receiving district responsible. So it's worth us, that one in particular stood out for me. So it's worth us talking about that to understand, is this something we want to build on, right? Because we could use that to advocate for more funding for those students that we would now be fully responsible for. Do we want to do our own proposal? So I just wanted to chime in and say I at least was tracking at the CSDE level what they put out last week. But yeah, Nicole, please jump in.
Nope. I was gonna say the exact same thing, that they released their proposals last week, and that formal proposals I have heard will go out from the Office of Policy and Management, which is the office that manages them, on the first day of session. So yeah, really timely.
And there may be some of those initiatives in the governor's budget announcement on the opening day of the session. Remember, this is a second year of the biennium. It will not be a brand new budget, but there will be some tweaks to it, or we will see it in the appropriate committees once OPM signs off. Or I guess it's signed off and once they submit it for drafting.
Thank you so much for highlighting that, and thank you for lifting that, for asking that question, Chairwoman, and for lifting that up, CFO Richard. We talked a little bit about this morning, and so we're glad that we're sharing it here because it is important. I see a few hands up, so I want to make sure. I see Board Member Fortune.
Thank you. My question is actually regarding what was just said. CFO Richard, can you explain more what it means to have the sending district responsible for the IEP? Does that mean we would need to increase our special ed staff because now they're also servicing all of the out of district students? Like, what does it mean to be responsible for the IEP? Does it mean we get to approve the IEP that is proposed for a child? Can you explain? Did they go into detail about that?
They did. And actually, I am now on my phone to get better service. But Christina, we can put in the chat, or we will send you after, their documentation of their priorities if someone has it. But I will explain that one because I think it's the most relevant for us. So how it currently works for non-Hartford magnet schools, so for CREC, for example, is we as the sending district are responsible for the IEP for that student. So running the IEP meetings, determining the services, and we are also financially responsible for those special education expenses. what is currently true with open choice, so when a student's going to a suburban district, is that we are not responsible for the IEP. So we are not running the IEP meetings, we're not determining services, but we are financially responsible for those expenses. And so the shift that the state is proposing is saying, okay, for open choice, let's align who owns the IEP with who is responsible financially. And so it would basically look more like what it does with CREC right now or other non-Hartford magnets. So we would own the IEP for that student. We would run IEP meetings. We would determine services. And to your point, that would also require an increase in resources because we have about 4,000 IEPs right now, I believe. And in open choice, there's about 600 to 700 additional ones. And so that's something that Dr. Hoffman was thinking about of if we were responsible for additional IEPs for, 600 to 700 students, we would need to increase the staff members responsible for doing the case management so that we make sure we're doing a good job in supporting those students, which is why I think that should be a broader conversation with the state. And if it does happen, I think we need to absolutely advocate to be getting the full funding for those students so that we can provide those services in the best way possible in order to serve them. So yeah, that's what it would mean is we would actually own those IEPs, and yes, we would need more staff members to be able to do that well.
So through you, Madam Chair, so does that mean, what is the financial implication to us? Does that make us worse off or better off? Because frankly, to me, it's just so unclear what it means to be responsible that I'm not sure. So we'd still be liable for the financial cost, but now we also need to have additional staff. So it's even worse for us financially,
Well,
correct?
well, no. So what I will say is that, and this is where it would depend on how it goes. So right now we are financially responsible, but we have no say in the matter. So this actually gives us a say in the matter where we're a part of determining what services is it that students need. So we would actually be playing a role in determining those services and then financing them, which is more similar to CREC, which right now is a better situation for us overall because we have more ability to influence the things that we are financially responsible for. And so that part actually could be a benefit to overall align who is paying for something and who's responsible for determining the services could be helpful, but it would need to come with additional resources for that to be true because we would need the additional people doing the work of determining the services. So I think this is where it gets really complicated. But it could be a good thing if we're going to be financially responsible. It is likely also good for us to have an ownership role in the process, like we do with CREC. Um, but it would require more resources for actually us to own that effectively.
Did that answer your question, Board Member Fortune? Oh.
It does. I think it just makes me question. It seems like it's going the opposite direction that we were thinking to try to advocate as a district. So
Yes, it's
I
the
think
opposite.
right. It's right. It's if we're starting from this one point, now they're further to one side and we're further to the opposite side. Maybe we want to rethink our strategy because it's just going to be that much harder to be arguing the exact opposite of what the State Department of Education is looking to advocate for.
Yes, which is why I think we would go after the more funding, or I think we could frame it in a way that thank you, State Department, for acknowledging that the party responsible for the expenses should also be responsible for the IEP. Our proposal is that because the receiving district is already responsible for the IEP and educating that student, they should also be financially responsible. So I think there's also a way of using that to say, because I do think they're acknowledging there should be alignment between the responsibility for expenses and determination of services. But yes, to your point, they have gone the opposite way than what we were proposing.
Yeah, and we just have to make sure that there's not an unfunded mandate to it, right? Like that there's going to be needed support. Like if that's going to be true, then we need additional support. I see board members have their hands up, but Dr. Hoffman, I also saw your hand up and then it went down. Do you still want to say something, point of clarity or anything like that?
CFO Richard actually described that perfectly.
Perfect. Okay, so we have about 10 minutes, 15 minutes. I'm going to go in order: Board Member Tatum, then Board Member Darister Ledger, and then Board Member Fortune. Back to you.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm hesitating to dive into this just because like chewing on this particular thing is to me so valuable and like this might not be the right venue for it. yeah, just like these kinds of discussions of like we have identified a problem in the funding and the responsibility as it pertains to special education students enrolled in open choice. It's encouraging to see that the State Department of Education has apparently identified a similar problem, that like this is an issue that needs to be resolved in some way, and we've come up with different solutions for different reasons, and kind of puzzling through the different benefits and um, drawbacks of different strategies for resolving that problem is really interesting, and is the kind of thing that I think like needs a real robust conversation with folks at the table. You know, I'd be curious to know in the State Department's process of development of their legislative priorities, like who was at the table when that strategy was what they proposed to resolve that particular problem of having Hartford Public School staff be responsible for the IEPs for those students, and how did they imagine that working? Yeah, I see it both ways, and I saw uh Jen, I saw your I saw your eyes kind of get big when you were thinking about what that would mean for our staffing. And yeah, just the I'll stop rambling there. My point is that kind of discussion and like thinking about the implications of it is something that would be really important for anyone advocating in the legislative world to be pretty well versed in, and would really want to make sure that the folks who are most impacted are at the table when those proposals are being discussed.
Thank you for that, Board Member Tatum. Board Member Director Ledger.
Thank you. I just wanted to say that I would be in agreement. And I like the idea of Hartford having a say in owning the IEP as opposed to just paying for it, because you have, an extra lens. You have that Hartford lens on that student or students. And also there's also there may be different factors or different ideas or something that can be that the Hartford staff can contribute to that IEP to help that student, because ultimately, that student is being educated in another district. However, that student has to come home every day.
Absolutely. Thank you, Board Member Director Ledger, for your thoughts, and Board Member Fortune.
Thank you. I guess I think what I have to say is along the lines of what Board Member Tatum just shared. I am rethinking our strategies now, and I wonder if we should also be looking more closely at everything that the State Department of Education has proposed to try to see where there's some type of synergy or alignment with the direction that we were going. Because I think to the extent that we can tag along and find ways to have a positive income, positive impact on our budget, and it aligns with what they were trying to do, that would be beneficial. I'm still processing their opposite direction in terms of special education. But, if it is the case, as we've sort of believed, not that we've had, hard proof, but if it is the case that some children Hartford students are receiving services that are really not necessary through their IEPs outside of our district, potentially being able to be involved in the IEPs and owning it, or at least being responsible for it, could potentially be a cost saving. So I wonder if that could offset the additional staffing that we would need. Obviously, I think it's hard to determine that, but I would like to see what their legislative proposals are and compare them to what we've been thinking, to see exactly, how should we sort of shift and adjust, or try to tag along, or maybe try to approach them and see if they would want to revise some of their proposals to be more in alignment with ours. But I think it's just a worthwhile exercise.
Is it okay, Board Member Tatum, if I just read what you wrote on the chat? just for records purposes? Or you want to
You,
say it?
it's tangential, but go ahead. I was just sort of continuing to spin on like thinking about the implications of that,
Okay.
of what that change would be like for the staff.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So basically, what Board Member Tatum shared was could be especially tricky to work if the Hartford special education staff that would be responsible didn't have strong relationship with the teachers in all of those districts. I'd imagine that challenge is somewhat present with non-HPS magnets already, but even be more challenging given the number of open choice schools and the relatively few Hartford students served by them. So what I'm hearing from here is that there's a desire to know a little bit deeper what the State Department of Education is doing. Might that be something, Nicole and Patrick, that you can take a look at and make sure that maybe next meeting that we have, you're able to present or just write a little blurb about that we can share via email, so that we are all aware now that some of the other prior, like we know we started our ideation, now other folks have started their ideation and have presented what they're working on. So if we can probably, would you be able to do that and either write something or present something next time just to make sure the board has that information? I mean, we already put it in the chat, but just nothing beats an explanation and talking it through.
We will also reach out to our counterparts in the department for any other background they can give us on that. So I think someone has asked, who's actually pushing this forward within the department. So we can certainly do that.
Perfect. That is wonderful. And just for next steps, Christina, can you let me know, do we have another meeting on the books? Was this the last one we scheduled up to?
That's what I was gonna. I think this is the last one because, well, let me just, yeah. But I believe this is the last one, but I'll triple check.
Okay, so we can share via email. So what will happen next, I think, let's meet, the team will meet to get ready for that January 29th meeting with our legislative team up at the Capitol. We will have more information then. Nicole and Patrick will work on getting that information and those data points and that overview of the State Department of Education. We will then be able to come back and then schedule some follow-up meetings post that, but let's get through that 29th meeting so we don't have to keep, I think we've gotten a good cadence, we gotten some of what we need. We have to now collect some information and then come back to the group. So Christina and I can work on scheduling meetings post that.
This is the last one. Confirmed.
This is then that cadence worked out just perfectly because I do not want to waste a meeting that is unnecessary if we don't need to have it. Everybody's very too busy for that to be the case. So next steps, we'll meet, we'll prep individually together with the district to do that meeting on the 29th. From that meeting, we will have some more information about what we should know and present back here about what tactics we want to do in terms of outreach. We will also have more information on the State Department of Education. And we will set up a scheduled meeting to follow up, present those things back to you all. We will have the meeting with the State Finance Project. We might invite them as well to speak to this group too, just so that you are all in the same page about what they do, what their work that they're focusing on. So after we meet with them, and finally, from all of that data that we've collected, we can figure out what were some of those tactics that we want to do in terms of outreach for the community. And in the meantime, the district will work on that one pager with some of those key points, financial key points, to make sure that all of us here and the larger community have access to them and that our legislators also have access to those numbers so that it can better also inform their legislating and their policy making as they're engaging in this session. Because I think the more information we can provide that's accurate, the better it is as well. Anything that I am missing, Patrick, CFO, Nicole, Superintendent, anyone? Okay. We did that, y'all. I hope this meeting was useful and I hope you got information that was useful to you all. And we will continue this conversation One thing I want to also note is that we want to make sure that our students, all of our students, especially and including our special education students, have what they need. We never want to be in a position where the problem is the fact that the students need their special education. They need their special education, and we are required and should want to provide it. And it's really about looking the best way to be able to do so. So I want that to carry us through, because I think that's an important conversation as we're talking about equity and justice. And I know that is in the context of where we are today with the national government, that is not something that they like, but it is something that it is important, and it is something that it is based on justice and equitable distribution of resources, and that a district like Hartford has to lead into that, because we know that we are under a system that is inequitable to begin with. So I appreciate you and all of the efforts that you have, as we continue to push the narrative shift around Hartford, but also having those clear education points and areas so that we can continue to advocate effectively, clearly, and with accurate data, both in our spheres of influence as well as with our legislative partners. So I appreciate you all for your time, and I hope you have a happy weekend, and please stay warm. There's a big storm coming. So if you are watching from home, please take precautions. It's going to be worse in the Midwest, but we are going to see it here. So please take precautions this weekend to make sure you and your family are safe. And I hope you all have a wonderful evening. Take care, everyone.
You have a future as a weather lady.